Parasite and cancer. Even though I started the academic year at the top of the list of students with the best admissions, I miraculously ended the semester using almost only the knowledge I had acquired earlier. Others quickly slapped homework on the knee because they were still relatively basic. However, I knew that, in the long run, it was pointless. Subsequent conversations with my mother also did not help to solve the problem because the only problem she saw was me and my lack of passion and commitment. She disagreed with letting me live in a dormitory because people sleep naked in the dormitory. I also had yet to learn about renting a student room for similar reasons. I dropped out of college and clarified that I wanted to go where I originally wanted to go, in a completely different city. My mother disagreed, informing me that I only had one chance. She laughed contemptuously in my face that I had just lost my life and was a victim of fate. I started looking for a job, although it was difficult. I am still determining what the job market for young people looks like now. Still, in those days, no one wanted to hire a 19-year-old girl with zero experience, even for the most straightforward jobs. 2 months was enough for it to escalate. More and more often, I heard from my mother that I was a parasite and cancer. Her voice was joined by the rest of the family, telling me that I was sitting on her hump and threatening to get me kicked out of the house if I didn't get a job and contribute to household expenses. The explanations also failed. Mother works hard. She does so much for you. You are an ungrateful monster. You lie. Where was my dad at that time? He needed to learn what was happening in another city, working 2 jobs. He also didn't know that my family was threatening me, that my mother wouldn't allow me to study. She was effectively cutting him off by telling me that he ran away because he didn't love me and telling him, in turn, that I didn't love him and that I didn't want him at home. It wasn't until years later that I could rebuild my relationship with my dad. I am the problem. Meanwhile, my house escalated more and more, and during one of them, I called the police. But, unfortunately, here too, the police failed me. Not believing a young girl who is not beaten but believing a tearful mother who does not know what to do with an adult child who allegedly threatens her and a terrified uncle who thinks I am capable of murdering them in a dream. My uncle loudly stated that if the police couldn't lock me up, all he had to do was tie me to a tree in the woods. What about the police? She understood that the problem was severe, and that I was the problem. The visit ended with an official warning that my mother wanted me well, and if I tried to call them again, I would get a ticket. It was a watermill for my mother because she felt absolutely unpunished. At the moment when the policeman, entering my room with me, asked me if I had papers that I was mentally healthy, not sick, I began to put together for the first time what arguments my mother had used for the last few years and why all my words are considered worthless. The subsequent investigation in the following years proved that my mother regularly distributed information to my family, her family, and my friends that I was mentally ill and therefore needed specialist care and that my visits to the mental health clinic were only hers. They made it more accessible. She asked me to update her on where I was and what I was doing for my safety because she worried about me. It thoroughly explained why everyone reacted to my words about my mother in such a strange way. This sad, professionally successful woman known to all, with a heart for all children, cannot be a problem. I can't count how many times I've heard texts about, "You only have one mother. You're exaggerating." Or, "You should reach out to your mother because she loves you very much. She saw me last time." My family came in when my mother left the house, and my father stayed there one day. "It's time for a serious talk," they said. We were counting on support, but we were given a month to move out before the rest of the family took my dad away by force and made me legally incapacitated. The mother did not want to discuss this topic with us after her return, alternately keeping silent or shouting that she could not talk to us because it was impossible and that we were to leave. But, she said, she has the right to start her life anew. As requested, 2 weeks later, I moved out of the house. Suddenly in the morning, a few days later, she was still sleeping. I never said goodbye to her. She had no idea that the last night she yelled at me was the last time she saw me. I lived with my then boyfriend, now husband, who gave me a quiet space to find a job. I found and took it, and today I can confidently say that my career is booming. I've never told anyone about the past because I know from experience that after the password, my family thought I was mentally ill. Everyone starts to wonder, oh boy, I never looked at her from this side, and what if they were right? After a few years, I made a delicate attempt to connect with the rest of my family. It ended with a demand to return to his mother, who deserves financial support and help at home, with screams and insults. I cut contact completely. There will be no more attempts on my part. I can't forgive her. I don't feel obligated to let go of my mother because the line was crossed long ago. I could forgive all the mistakes resulting from her attempts and efforts to make it right, with better or worse results. But I cannot forgive her for what resulted from treachery and cruelty. A situation where a child decides not to maintain contact with a parent does not happen just like that. Instead, the parent impacts the relationship with the child for at least a dozen or so years. I also completely disagree with the expert who left her advice under the letter of my previous speaker. Working through the topic does not always mean that you have to forgive the perpetrator because it leads us, the victims, to humiliate ourselves further and pretend that forgiving someone for the harm they caused us solves and closes the case internally for ourselves. It is not the perpetrator who needs to be forgiven, but oneself, for all the concessions, humiliations, and situations when one acted contrary to one's character only to avoid escalating the situation. It is essential to understand that we are not to blame for what we experienced, but no one will ever pay us for it and bear the consequences. Through these experiences, we are at the points in life where we are. And no matter how we swear, they have defined us. It is not forgiving the abuser that leads to freedom but self-respect. One doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with the other. I want to tell people in a similar situation that it's a shame to waste your life on someone you are forced to live with under the same roof and whom you would avoid if only they had the opportunity. You have to trust yourself and respect yourself.